Today on Timescast, increasing tensions in Tahrir Square as protesters show no sign of leaving.
We have to go.
Journalists and human rights workers in Egypt are being singled out.
Today alone, we've tracked well over 50 cases of violations against journalists.
And a look at the Islamist group that may become key to U.S. relations with Egypt.
This is Stephen Farrell for the New York Times in Tahrir Square. I've been here since about 6 o'clock in the morning, and the mood here is very, very defiant. Lots of new people are coming in. We've spoken to many people around the square, and they're saying they're sickened by what they saw yesterday. They're sickened by the attacks on the protesters in the square yesterday, and they've decided to come and reinforce them. Tahrir Square is essentially two squares at the moment. In the centre here, it's almost a carnival, a party atmosphere. There's free food, there's free drink, there are doctors providing medicine. It feels very safe right here, right now, which is mid-afternoon. Just 300 meters, 300 yards away from me, it's a completely different mood. This is the other side of Tahrir Square in both senses. Behind me, there's just been a running battle between pro-government forces and anti-government forces. It was very confusing. There are 2 or 3 elevated highways running through the square north of Tahrir. Pro-government forces were on part of one, anti-government forces on part of another. They were surging backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. It was impossible to know who was who. Between them, Egyptian army tanks were moving, circling, shots were being fired. You couldn't tell who from and who to. Nobody knows if there's going to be more violence over the coming hours and days, but it's certainly another day of high tension in and around Tahrir Square. This is Stephen Farrell from the New York Times in Cairo.
I'm Brian Stelter in Doha, Qatar, visiting the headquarters of Al Jazeera, one of the media outlets that's come under severe scrutiny by the Egyptian government in recent days, as the government tries to stop access to the protests that continue in the streets of Cairo. On Thursday, it appeared there was a systematic attempt to remove the witnesses to the battles that are ongoing in the streets, as journalists and other observers like human rights workers were repeatedly targeted. Some journalists were arrested, others were detained, and others were beaten. Observers say the violence against journalists increased markedly on Thursday.
Today alone, we've tracked well over 50 cases of violations against journalists. Over the days, it has intensified, and now it's an all-out assault on really information itself.
One Al Jazeera reporter, Dan Nolan, wrote on Twitter on Thursday that thanks to a state media campaign on Egyptian television trying to demonize Al Jazeera, now pro-Mubarak protesters were hunting Al Jazeera staff. And we've seen that from other journalists as well, like CNN's Anderson Cooper on Wednesday night.
We know for a fact from previous experiences, whenever a government is so intent on eliminating witnesses, that this is usually a precursor to some very violent acts.
The frequencies for Al Jazeera, the satellite signals, have been changed repeatedly. It's been hard to keep up at times. But in a show of solidarity, a few days ago, other channels in the region started simulcasting Al Jazeera's broadcasts.
There is still no clear opposition leader in Egypt, but as Scott Shane reports, one of the few near certainties of a post-Mubarak Egypt will include a more powerful Muslim Brotherhood.
The role of Muslim Brotherhood has actually been very minor until today, at least. They were not among the organizers of the protests, and they have deliberately kept a low profile. Today, however, they did issue a statement calling for Mubarak to step down and calling for a multi-party coalition to take power. The Muslim Brotherhood was founded in 1928, and today it's the biggest Islamist movement in the Muslim world. It has branches in many countries, but it was really born in Egypt, where it is the largest opposition force against Mubarak and has been for many years. Officially it's banned there, but in a post-Mubarak Egypt, it is almost certain to take on an important political role. The real question is whether it would be satisfied with being one of a number of parties and sharing power, or whether it would seek to monopolize power and install a regime guided by Islamic law, Sharia. American officials, through several administrations, have not fully trusted the Brotherhood's renunciation of violence, and perhaps foremost, American administrations have not appreciated the Brotherhood's open hostility to Israel. Egypt had signed a peace treaty with Israel, and the Obama administration now realizes it probably has to deal with the Brotherhood, but it's very concerned about the future of that peace treaty and the future of relations between Egypt and Israel.
Join us again tomorrow for Timescast.